The dust from the stagecoach wheels settled around Rebecca Brennan's worn boots as she stepped onto the wooden platform in Animas Forks, Colorado, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack a rib. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia, clutching a single letter from a rancher named William Irving, who promised her a new life far from the suffocating poverty and ash-covered streets of the city where her parents had died during the winter of 1878. Now it was spring of 1879, and she stood alone in a mining town nestled high in the San Juan Mountains, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her 22 years. The mountain air was thinner here than anything she had ever experienced, and each breath felt like it only filled half her lungs. Rebecca pressed a gloved hand to her chest, trying to steady herself as she looked around the small settlement. The buildings were weathered wood and hope, clinging to the mountainside like stubborn weeds. Men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats moved past her without a second glance, their faces hardened by the altitude and the relentless search for silver that had brought this town into existence just a few years prior. "Miss Brennan." The voice came from behind her, deep and uncertain. Rebecca turned, and her breath caught for an entirely different reason. The man standing before her was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of winter sage. He held his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly disheveled from where the hat had been. He looked younger than she had expected from his formal letters, perhaps 26 or 27, with a face that was handsome in a weathered, genuine way that made her stomach flip unexpectedly. "Mr. Irving," she managed, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "William," he said, and a slow smile transformed his serious expression into something warm and welcoming. "Just William. I am mighty glad you made it safe. The journey must have been hard." "It was long," Rebecca admitted, suddenly aware of how travel-stained her dress was, how her auburn hair had escaped its pins in wild curls around her face. "But I am here. That you are." William stepped forward and picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing, though she knew it held everything she owned in the world. "The wagon is just over here. The ranch is about 8 miles north, following the Animas River Valley. It is a beautiful ride." Rebecca followed him to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. William helped her onto the bench seat with a gentleness that surprised her, then climbed up beside her. The springs creaked under his weight, and then they were moving, leaving the cluster of buildings behind as they headed into the wilderness. The landscape was unlike anything Rebecca had ever seen. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still white with snow despite the warming weather. The river rushed alongside the rough trail, its water clear and cold and impossibly blue. Aspens lined the banks, their leaves that fresh green that only comes in spring. Wild flowers dotted the meadows in splashes of purple and yellow and white. "It is beautiful," Rebecca said softly, drinking it all in. "Wait until you see the ranch," William said, and there was pride in his voice mixed with something that sounded like nervousness. "I have been working on it for 5 years now. It is not much, but it is good land, good water. The cattle do well here in the summer, though winters can be fierce." They talked as the wagon rolled on, the conversation awkward at first but gradually becoming easier. William told her about the ranch, about the 30 head of cattle he had built up from nothing, about the 2 horses besides these pulling the wagon, about the chickens and the garden plot. Rebecca talked about Philadelphia, about the textile factory where she had worked 14-hour days, about losing her parents to influenza, about the overcrowded boarding house where she had lived with 7 other women in 3 rooms. "I wanted something different," she said finally. "Something real. Does that sound foolish?" "No," William said firmly. "It sounds brave." The sun was lowering toward the mountain peaks when William turned the wagon off the main trail onto a narrower path that wound through a stand of pines. "Just over this rise," he said, and Rebecca could hear the anticipation in his voice. They crested the hill and William pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said simply, pointing down into the valley below. Rebecca looked, and the world tilted. The ranch spread out in a perfect mountain meadow, protected on three sides by forest and mountains. A cabin stood near the center, built of solid logs with a stone chimney. A barn, corrals, a chicken coop, everything neat and well maintained. The river curved along the eastern edge of the property, catching the golden light of the setting sun. Mountains framed it all like a painting, purple and blue and magnificent against the darkening sky. It was paradise. It was home. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. It was also at least 12,000 feet in altitude, and Rebecca had been climbing steadily for hours. The edges of her vision went dark and sparkly. Her lungs could not seem to pull in enough air. The reins slipped from her nerveless fingers as consciousness fled. Rebecca felt herself falling, felt the hard bench seat leave her, felt gravity take hold. But instead of hitting the ground, strong arms caught her, cradling her against a solid chest. Through the fog in her head, she heard William's voice, urgent and warm. "Welcome home." Then the darkness took her completely. When Rebecca opened her eyes, she was lying on something soft. A pillow cradled her head and a blanket covered her body. Lamplight flickered somewhere nearby, casting dancing shadows on log walls. For a moment, she could not remember where she was, and panic seized her. "Easy now." William's voice came from nearby, and she turned her head to find him sitting in a chair beside the bed, his face creased with concern. "You are safe. You fainted from the altitude, I think. You city folks are not used to breathing this high up. Should have thought of that, should have brought you up slower. I am sorry." Rebecca tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness made her sink back against the pillows. "I am all right," she said, though her voice was weak. "I just need a moment." "Take all the time you need." William stood and moved to a table, returning with a cup of water. He helped her sit up enough to drink, supporting her shoulders with surprising gentleness. The water was cold and sweet, tasting of mountain snow. "Drink slow. Small sips. It will help." Rebecca did as he instructed, and gradually the dizziness receded. She became aware that she was in a small but tidy bedroom, that her boots had been removed, but she was otherwise fully dressed, that William had placed her on what must be his own bed. "I am sorry," she said. "What a way to arrive, fainting like some delicate flower. You traveled 2,000 miles alone to start a new life with a man you never met," William said, settling back into the chair. "That is not delicate. That is strong. The altitude just takes some getting used to, that is all. Give yourself a few days, and you will be breathing fine." They looked at each other in the lamplight, really looked at each other for the first time. Rebecca saw the kindness in his eyes, the worry lines on his forehead, the calluses on his hands from years of hard work. She saw a man who had built something from nothing, who had written her letters filled with honest hopes rather than empty promises, who had caught her when she fell and brought her safely inside. "Thank you," she said softly, "for catching me." "Always," William replied, and something in his voice made her heart skip. The first few days were hard. Rebecca's body struggled to adjust to the thin mountain air, leaving her tired and breathless with even simple tasks. But William was patient, never pushing her, always there with a steadying hand or an encouraging word. He had given her the bedroom and taken to sleeping in the barn, despite her protests. He cooked simple meals of beans and bacon and biscuits, apologizing for his lack of culinary skill. He showed her around the property slowly, letting her rest when she needed to, pointing out his plans for expansion and improvement. The cabin was small but sturdy, built to withstand the brutal mountain winters. Besides the bedroom, there was a main room with a fireplace, a rough kitchen area, and a table with 2 chairs that William had made himself. The windows had real glass, a luxury that surprised Rebecca. The floor was smooth planks that someone had taken care to fit together properly. It was clear that William had put thought and effort into making this place a real home. On the 4th day, Rebecca woke feeling stronger. The constant headache had faded, and her lungs no longer burned with each breath. She rose early, determined to prove she was not an invalid, and started breakfast before William came in from the morning chores. He stopped in the doorway, surprise clear on his face as he saw her standing at the stove, flipping bacon in the cast-iron skillet. "You are up." "I am better," Rebecca said, smiling at him over her shoulder. "And I needed to show you that I can actually cook. I was beginning to worry you thought you had imported a useless city woman." William hung his hat on the peg by the door and moved to wash his hands in the basin. "I never thought that. I just wanted you to rest and get well." They sat down to breakfast together, and for the first time the awkwardness between them seemed to ease. They talked about the ranch work that needed doing, about the cattle that would need to be moved to higher pasture in another month, about the garden Rebecca wanted to plant. It felt domestic and comfortable and strangely right. "William," Rebecca said as she poured him more coffee, "I need to ask you something." He looked up, his expression open. "Anything. In your letters, you never really said why you wanted a mail-order bride. Why not court someone local?" William was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "There are not many women in Animas Forks," he said slowly. "And the ones who are here, well, most of them have their eyes set on the miners who might strike it rich. I am just a rancher, and this is hard country, hard work. I wanted someone who understood that life is not always easy, someone who had known struggle and was not afraid of it, someone looking for the same thing I am." "And what are you looking for?" Rebecca asked softly. William met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "A partner, someone to build something with, someone to share the good days and help shoulder the bad ones, someone who wants to make a real home, not just wait around for an easier life to fall in their lap." Rebecca felt warmth spread through her chest. "I want that too. I want to work for something that is mine, ours," she corrected. "I want to matter." "You already do," William said quietly. The spring days stretched longer as May arrived, and Rebecca found her rhythm in the mountain life. She planted a garden near the cabin, coaxing seeds into the rich soil that William had prepared. She tended the chickens and gathered eggs, learned to make bread in the temperamental oven, mended William's worn shirts and socks. In the afternoons, when the work was done, William taught her to ride one of the gentler horses, a mare named Willow with kind eyes and a patient disposition. They rode out together to check on the cattle, and Rebecca fell more in love with the land each day. The mountains were constant companions, their moods changing with the light and weather. Some days they were soft and welcoming, draped in spring flowers and new green. Other days they were fierce and intimidating, with storms that rolled in without warning and filled the valley with thunder and lightning that shook the ground. Rebecca learned to read the signs like William did, to see when weather was coming, to know which meadows the cattle preferred, to understand the rhythm of the ranch. She also learned about William himself, in the quiet moments they shared. He had come west from Missouri when he was 18, worked as a ranch hand for years, saved every penny until he could buy this land. He had built the cabin himself, log by log, dreaming of the life he would make here. He read books in the evenings, everything from agricultural journals to poetry, though he seemed embarrassed to admit the latter. "My mother loved poetry," he said one night as they sat by the fire, Rebecca mending and William reading. "She used to recite it while she worked. I guess it stuck with me." "Will you read some to me?" Rebecca asked, setting down her sewing. William hesitated, then began to read, his deep voice giving life to words about nature and beauty and longing. Rebecca watched him in the firelight, this strong, capable man who could build a ranch from nothing but also carried poetry in his heart, and felt something shift inside her. This was not just about finding a new life anymore. This was about finding someone who made that life worth living. As if sensing her gaze, William looked up. Their eyes met across the small room, and the air between them seemed to thicken. William closed the book slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Rebecca," he said, his voice rough, "I need you to know something." "What?" she whispered. "When I asked you to come here, I thought I was looking for a partner, someone to help with the ranch, to share the work. And you are that, you are all of that and more, but somewhere along the way it became something different for me." He stood, moving closer but still maintaining a respectful distance. "I am falling in love with you. I know that might not be what you signed up for, and if you just want this to be a partnership, a practical arrangement, I will respect that. But I needed to tell you the truth." Rebecca's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. She stood as well, setting aside her mending with shaking hands. "William, I have been terrified to admit it, even to myself, but I am falling in love with you too. Maybe I have been since you caught me that first day and said welcome home. Maybe even before that, reading your letters and hearing the kind of man you were in every word." The distance between them closed, though Rebecca could not have said who moved first. William's hands came up to cup her face, his callous thumbs brushing her cheeks with infinite gentleness. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Rebecca breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then it deepened, becoming something that spoke of longing and promise and the beginning of something neither of them could name but both of them felt. When they finally pulled apart, William rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. "Marry me," he said. "For real, not just as a practical arrangement. Marry me because I love you and I want to spend every day of my life making you happy." "Yes," Rebecca said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." They were married 2 weeks later by a traveling preacher who came through Animas Forks once a month to tend to the spiritual needs of the scattered settlers and miners. Rebecca wore the best dress she owned, a simple blue calico that she had carefully pressed. William had ridden into town the day before and returned with a small gold band that he slipped onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. The ceremony was simple, held in the cabin with just 2 witnesses, a miner named Jack Peterson and his wife Sarah, who lived 5 miles down the valley. But the words were no less meaningful for the lack of pageantry. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, William kissed Rebecca with such tenderness that Sarah dabbed at her eyes with her handkerchief. They shared a simple meal afterward, and then their guests departed, leaving William and Rebecca alone as husband and wife. The evening felt charged with anticipation and nervousness. They moved around each other carefully, both acutely aware of what the night would bring. "Are you afraid?" William asked as they stood together watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. "A little," Rebecca admitted, "but mostly I am just happy." William pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on top of her head. "I will be gentle," he promised. "We will go at whatever pace you need." Rebecca turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I trust you," she said simply, and meant it with her whole heart. Their wedding night was everything Rebecca had hoped for and more. William was patient and loving, taking time to help her relax, to show her that physical intimacy could be beautiful and connecting rather than something to be endured. They learned each other slowly, trading touches and kisses and whispered words until the awkwardness fell away, and there was only the two of them, joined together in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, lying in William's arms with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to a steady rhythm, Rebecca felt a peace she had never known before. This was what home felt like, not just a place but a person, a connection, a love that made everything else make sense. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," William replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Now and always. The summer unfolded in a haze of happiness and hard work. Rebecca's garden flourished in the mountain sun and cool nights, producing more vegetables than the two of them could eat. She learned to can and preserve, filling the small pantry with jars of beans and tomatoes and pickles. The chickens produced reliably, and Rebecca began trading eggs in town for other supplies they needed. She also discovered she had a talent for baking, and William proclaimed her bread and pies better than anything he had ever tasted. William worked from dawn to dusk with the cattle and horses, repairing fences, cutting hay for the winter, always planning and improving. But he always made time for Rebecca, whether it was an evening ride to check on a far pasture or stolen moments in the middle of the day when he would sweep her into his arms and kiss her until she was breathless. They grew closer every day, learning each other's rhythms and moods. Rebecca learned that William was quieter when he was worried, that he hummed tunelessly when he worked, that his favorite meal was fried chicken with mashed potatoes. William learned that Rebecca sang while she cooked, that she was terrified of the thunder but would never admit it, that she cried at beautiful sunsets but stayed stoic in the face of actual hardship. In July, a group of cattle rustlers passed through the valley, and William joined with other ranchers to track them down. Rebecca spent 3 anxious days and nights alone at the ranch, sleeping with one of William's rifles near the bed, jumping at every sound. When William finally returned, tired and dirty but unharmed, she ran out to meet him and clung to him so tightly he laughed and lifted her right off her feet. "I am all right," he assured her, carrying her into the cabin. "We got the cattle back and the rustlers are in custody. But I hated being away from you." "Do not do it again," Rebecca said fiercely, even though she knew she could not ask that of him. The ranch was their livelihood, and William would always do what was necessary to protect it. "I will always come back to you," William promised instead. No matter what. By late August, Rebecca had begun to suspect she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses had not come, and she felt a strange tiredness that was different from the usual fatigue of hard work. She said nothing at first, wanting to be certain before getting William's hopes up. But when another month passed, and her body began to change in subtle ways, she knew she had to tell him. She chose a Sunday evening after a long day of rest and a good dinner. They were sitting on the porch watching the stars emerge, and Rebecca took William's hand in hers. "William, I need to tell you something." He turned to her, immediately attentive. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right," Rebecca said, smiling at him through sudden tears. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, William just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and genuine it transformed him. He let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the valley and swept Rebecca into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "A baby," he kept saying, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby." That night they lay in bed together, William's hand resting gently on Rebecca's still flat stomach, talking about the future. They discussed names, and whether the baby would look more like him or her, whether they would need to add another room to the cabin, how they would manage the ranch work when Rebecca was further along. "I am going to take such good care of you both," William promised, his voice serious in the darkness. "You will never want for anything." "I already have everything I need," Rebecca replied, covering his hand with hers. "I have you." The autumn was glorious, with the aspens turning gold and the mountains dusted with fresh snow at the higher elevations. Rebecca continued to work as much as she could, though William tried to get her to rest more. She was stubborn about it, insisting that she was pregnant, not ill, and that women had been having babies while doing ranch work since time began. They made a trip to Animas Forks in September so Rebecca could see the doctor, a gruff man named Henry Wright, who had delivered half the babies in the county. He confirmed what Rebecca already knew and pronounced her healthy and strong. "Baby should come in early April," Dr. Wright said. "You are doing everything right. Just eat well, rest when you can, and do not do any heavy lifting. Your husband looks like the worrying type, so let him fuss over you." William did fuss, and Rebecca alternated between finding it endearing and exasperating. He would not let her carry water or wood, insisted on doing all the heavy chores himself, and looked panicked every time she moved too quickly. But she loved him for it, for the way his concern showed how much he cared. As winter approached, they prepared the cabin and the barn for the harsh months ahead. William had warned Rebecca that mountain winters were brutal, with snow measured in feet rather than inches and temperatures that could drop far below zero. They laid in supplies, stacking firewood high against the cabin wall, filling the root cellar with vegetables from the garden, making sure they had enough food for themselves and the animals to last until spring. The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that made everything look clean and magical. Rebecca stood at the window watching it fall, William's arms around her growing belly, and felt completely content. This was her life now. This mountain valley, this solid cabin, this good man, this baby growing inside her. All of it felt like the fulfillment of dreams she had not even known she had. Winter settled in with a vengeance by mid-November, and Rebecca understood what William had meant about it being fierce. The snow came down in sheets, piling up against the cabin walls. The wind howled through the valley like something alive and angry. Some days it was too dangerous to go outside at all, and they stayed close to the fire, grateful for William's careful preparations. But there was a coziness to it too, being snowbound together. They read by firelight, played cards, talked about everything and nothing. William worked on carving a cradle for the baby, his hands shaping the wood with patient skill. Rebecca knitted tiny clothes and blankets, her needles clicking softly in the quiet evenings. Christmas came, and they celebrated simply, exchanging small handmade gifts. William had carved Rebecca a beautiful jewelry box with their initials intertwined on the lid. Rebecca had knitted him a warm scarf and hat from wool she had traded for in town. They felt richer than any mining baron, surrounded by love and warmth despite the blizzard raging outside. "This is the best Christmas of my life," William said as they sat together by the fire, Rebecca tucked against his side with his arm around her shoulders. "Mine too," Rebecca agreed, resting her hand on her belly where the baby had started to move and kick. "I never imagined I could be this happy." January and February were the hardest months, with the cold so intense it made Rebecca's teeth ache, and the snow so deep they had to dig tunnels to reach the barn. But William kept them safe and warm, venturing out every day to care for the animals, breaking ice on the water troughs, making sure everyone had enough to eat. Rebecca felt huge by then, her belly round and tight, the baby active and demanding. She tired easily and her back ached constantly, but she tried not to complain. William was attentive to every discomfort, rubbing her feet at night, helping her in and out of chairs, never making her feel like a burden even though she sometimes felt like one. "You are growing our child," he reminded her when she apologized for not being able to do more. "That is the most important work there is." By March, the worst of the winter had passed, though snow still covered the ground. Rebecca was enormous and uncomfortable, counting the days until the baby would arrive. William had gone to town in a break in the weather to bring Dr. Wright to the ranch, wanting the doctor close by when Rebecca's time came. Dr. Wright stayed with them for a week, bunking in the barn and taking his meals in the cabin. He pronounced Rebecca ready to deliver any day and warned William to be prepared for a long labor since this was their first child. The baby, however, had other ideas. Rebecca's labor started on a bright morning in early April, just as the doctor had predicted. The pains began as a dull ache in her back, growing stronger and more regular through the morning. By noon, there was no doubt about what was happening. Dr. Wright took charge, ordering William to boil water and gather clean linens. Rebecca labored through the afternoon, walking when she could, resting when the pains grew too intense. William stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, whispering encouragement. As the sun began to set, the pains grew stronger and closer together. Dr. Wright examined Rebecca and nodded approvingly. "Almost there. You are doing fine, young lady. Just keep breathing and push when I tell you." The final stage of labor was intense and overwhelming. Rebecca gripped William's hand so hard she was sure she was breaking bones, but he never complained, just stayed right there with her, his presence an anchor in the storm. Dr. Wright coached her through each push, his voice calm and experienced. And then, just as the last rays of sunlight faded from the room, a baby's cry filled the cabin, sharp and strong and absolutely perfect. "It is a boy," Dr. Wright announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy, strong boy." William was crying, tears streaming down his face as he kissed Rebecca's forehead over and over. "You did it. You did it. He is perfect." Rebecca was exhausted and overwhelmed, but when Dr. Wright cleaned the baby and placed him in her arms, she felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. The baby had dark hair like William and was red-faced from crying, his tiny fists waving in the air. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tracing his perfect features with a gentle finger. "We have been waiting for you." William sat on the edge of the bed, his arm around Rebecca, both of them staring at their son in wonder. "What should we name him?" he asked softly. They had discussed names for months but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at the baby's face, Rebecca knew. "Thomas," she said, "after my father, Thomas Irving." "Thomas," William repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Thomas William Irving." "Hello, Thomas," Rebecca said to the baby, who had stopped crying and was looking at her with unfocused newborn eyes. "Welcome home." Dr. Wright stayed for 3 more days to make sure both Rebecca and the baby were doing well. He showed Rebecca how to nurse, how to care for the umbilical cord, how to recognize signs of fever or illness. He taught William how to help with the baby, how to change him and swaddle him and support his delicate head. "You two are going to do just fine," the doctor said when he finally prepared to leave. "That is a strong, healthy baby, and you are both natural parents. Just trust your instincts." The first weeks with Thomas were exhausting and wonderful all at once. Rebecca had never been so tired in her life. waking every few hours to nurse the baby, functioning on broken sleep and sheer love. But William was amazing, taking the baby whenever he could to let Rebecca rest, walking the floor with Thomas at night when he fussed, changing diapers and singing off-key lullabies. They moved through those early days in a haze of new parenthood, learning their baby's cries and needs, marveling at every small change and milestone. When Thomas smiled for the first time, a genuine social smile at 6 weeks old, they both cried. When he started sleeping for longer stretches at night, they felt like they had won a lottery. As spring turned to summer and Thomas grew stronger and more alert, Rebecca found her rhythm again. She carried the baby with her as she worked, strapping him to her chest in a sling while she tended the garden or the chickens. William built a cradle that could sit safely in the shade while they worked outside, and Thomas would lie there watching the leaves and sky with wide, curious eyes. The ranch thrived that summer. William hired a young man named James to help with the cattle work, freeing him up to spend more time near the cabin and his family. The herd grew, the garden produced abundantly, and the small ranch began to feel like a real homestead. In August, they took Thomas to town for the first time. At 4 months old, he was a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everyone and charmed all the ladies at the general store. Sarah Peterson made a fuss over him, and even gruff Dr. Wright softened when he examined Thomas and pronounced him thriving. "You two have done well," the doctor said, genuine warmth in his voice. "This is a fine, healthy boy." As the seasons cycled and Thomas grew, so did the ranch and the love between Rebecca and William. They faced challenges, weathered storms both literal and figurative, but they did it together. When Thomas was 18 months old, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news was no less joyful but less shocking, just a happy continuation of the life they were building. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose, arrived in the spring of 1882. She had Rebecca's auburn hair and William's green eyes, and a temperament that was much more demanding than her easy-going brother. Thomas, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. William added 2 more rooms to the cabin, creating space for their growing family. He built proper beds for the children, carved toys for Thomas, made a rocking chair for Rebecca to nurse Margaret. Every improvement to the house and ranch was done with love and pride, building something that would last. The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and the animals. He followed William everywhere, learning to ride and rope and do the work of a rancher. Margaret was more independent, with a stubborn streak that both exasperated and delighted her parents. She preferred helping Rebecca with the house and garden, but could also ride as well as any boy when she set her mind to it. In 1885, Rebecca gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Samuel. He was a perfect blend of both parents, with Rebecca's quick mind and William's steady temperament. The cabin rang with the sound of children's laughter, with the chaos and joy of a real family. William expanded the ranch steadily, buying more land when neighboring homesteaders gave up and moved on, building the herd until they had nearly 100 head of cattle. He hired permanent help, 2 good men who bunked in the expanded barn and worked hard. The ranch became one of the most successful in the valley, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. But for all the growth and success, William and Rebecca never lost sight of what mattered most. Every evening, no matter how hard the work had been, they gathered the children for dinner at the big table William had built. They shared the day's events, laughed at the children's stories, gave thanks for their blessings. And every night, After the children were tucked into bed, William and Rebecca would sit together on the porch they had added, watching the stars emerge over the mountains, holding hands like they had in the beginning. "You ever regret it?" William asked one summer evening in 1890, when they had been married 11 years. "Leaving Philadelphia, coming here sight unseen, tying your life to a stranger." Rebecca looked at him, at this man who had been her whole world for more than a decade, who had given her 3 beautiful children and a life beyond her wildest dreams. She thought about the frightened girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Animas Forks all those years ago, not sure what she would find. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You caught me when I fell, and you have been catching me ever since. This is home. You are home." William pulled her close, kissing her with the same passion he had shown on their wedding night. "I love you, Rebecca Irving, more now than I did then, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "Always," Rebecca whispered against his lips, the word a promise and a prayer. The children grew and thrived. Thomas, at 14, was already nearly as tall as William and took on more responsibility with the ranch every year. At 12, Margaret had developed a talent for training horses and was teaching the youngest, Samuel, to ride. At 5, Samuel was fearless and full of questions, driving both his parents and siblings crazy with his constant curiosity. Rebecca looked at her family with profound gratitude. Her children were healthy and happy, growing up with opportunities she had never had. They knew hard work, but also joy. They understood the value of family and the land. They were being raised with love and security, surrounded by the beauty of the mountains. In the autumn of 1891, William surprised Rebecca with a trip to Denver. They left the children with Sarah and Jack Peterson, who had become like family over the years, and took the train to the city. It was Rebecca's first time away from the ranch in years, and she felt oddly nervous, but William had planned everything perfectly. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate at restaurants, attended a theater performance. He bought her a new dress and a beautiful cameo brooch. They walked the city streets hand in hand, and Rebecca marveled at how far she had come from the desperate girl in Philadelphia. "Why did you do all this?" she asked on their last evening as they sat in the hotel restaurant overlooking the city lights. William reached across the table and took her hand. "Because you have given me everything, and I wanted to give you something special. You are the most amazing woman I have ever known, Rebecca. You took a chance on a stranger, built a home in the wilderness, gave me 3 incredible children, and you have made every single day of my life better. I wanted you to know how much I appreciate you." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "You do not need to take me to Denver to show me that. You show me every day in 100 small ways. In the coffee you make before I wake up, in the way you listen to the children's stories even when you are exhausted, in the way you still look at me like I am something precious." "You are precious," William said seriously. "You are everything." They returned to the ranch renewed and even more connected. The children had done well in their absence, the ranch had run smoothly, and life continued in its good, steady rhythm. As the years passed, Rebecca and William watched their children grow into adults. Thomas, serious and responsible, took on more of the ranch management, showing the same dedication his father had. At 19, he started courting a sweet girl from town named Emily, and William and Rebecca saw their own story reflected in the young couple's shy smiles and held hands. Margaret, at 17, was fierce and independent. She had no interest in marriage yet, too focused on her horses and her dreams of breeding quality stock. Rebecca saw herself in her daughter's determination and supported her completely, even as other townspeople whispered about how unconventional the Irving girl was. Samuel, at 12, was showing signs of becoming a scholar. He devoured every book he could get his hands on, and William and Rebecca discussed sending him to school in Denver when he was older, wanting to give him every opportunity to follow his dreams. In the spring of 1897, Thomas married Emily in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch. Rebecca cried happy tears as she watched her firstborn exchange vows with his bride, remembering her own simple wedding nearly 2 decades before. William squeezed her hand, knowing exactly what she was thinking. "We did good," he whispered to her during the celebration. "We did very good," Rebecca agreed, watching Thomas and Emily dance, their faces glowing with the same love and hope she and William had started with. Thomas and Emily built a small house on the western edge of the ranch property, and the next spring, they made William and Rebecca grandparents with the birth of a daughter they named Rebecca, after her grandmother. Holding her tiny namesake, Rebecca felt the beautiful circle of life complete itself. Margaret finally married at 23 to a horse trainer named David, who understood and appreciated her independent spirit. Their wedding was less traditional, held in a meadow with Margaret in a riding skirt rather than a fancy dress, but it was perfect for them. She and David stayed on the ranch, building a breeding program that quickly gained regional recognition. Samuel, as predicted, went to school in Denver at 16, his sharp mind hungry for knowledge. But he came home every summer, and he never lost his love for the ranch and the mountains. He eventually became a teacher, bringing education back to the mountain communities, making Rebecca and William impossibly proud. The ranch continued to prosper. William had built something that would last, something he could pass down to his children and grandchildren. The original small cabin was now the heart of a compound, surrounded by additional buildings and improvements, but still solid and true at its center. In the summer of 1905, William and Rebecca celebrated their 26th anniversary. Their children threw them a party, inviting neighbors and friends from all over the valley. The ranch was full of laughter and music and love, exactly as it had always been. That evening, after the guests had gone home and the children had returned to their own houses, Rebecca and William sat on their porch in the rocking chairs they had occupied for decades. They were both gray now, their hands showing the wear of years of hard work, their faces lined with age and sun. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people who had fallen in love in this very spot so many years before. "You remember the day I arrived?" Rebecca asked, her voice soft in the twilight. "How I fainted when I saw the ranch," William laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "I thought I had killed you, bringing you up to this altitude without warning. I was terrified. But you caught me," Rebecca said, reaching over to take his hand. "I did," William agreed, squeezing her fingers gently, "and I have been catching you ever since." "We have been catching each other," Rebecca corrected. "That is what partners do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. The same peaks that had overwhelmed Rebecca that first day now felt like old friends, constant and comforting. "I would do it all again," Rebecca said suddenly. "Every hard day, every challenge, every moment. I would do it all exactly the same because it led me here to you, to this life." William stood and pulled Rebecca to her feet, taking her into his arms as he had done thousands of times before. "Welcome home," he whispered. Echoing the words he had spoken the very first day, Rebecca smiled against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I am home," she replied. "I have been home since the moment you caught me." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they swayed together gently, an old couple still very much in love, still building their life together one day at a time. Below them, the ranch sprawled in the twilight, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together, when they loved each other, when they refused to give up. The next morning, Rebecca woke before dawn as she always did, even though she no longer had to. The house was quiet, the ranch peaceful. She slipped out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake William, and made her way to the kitchen. As she started the coffee, she looked out the window at the land they had built together. Their grandchildren, 4 of them now, would be arriving later that day for a visit. The house would ring with young voices and laughter again. Thomas and Emily were talking about building yet another house on the property. Margaret's horses had won ribbons at the county fair. Samuel had been offered a position at a school in Denver, but was still deciding if he wanted to leave the mountains. Life continued to unfold, generation after generation, all of it rooted in the choice Rebecca had made to step off that stagecoach in Animas Forks so many years ago. All of it built on the foundation of love between her and William. William emerged from the bedroom, his hair rumpled, his eyes soft with sleep. He came up behind Rebecca and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder as they looked out at their kingdom together. "Good morning, love," he murmured. "Good morning," Rebecca replied, leaning back into his embrace. They had been given so much, more than either of them could have imagined that day when she fainted and he caught her. They had built not just a ranch but a legacy, not just a house but a home, not just a marriage but a love story that would echo through their children and grandchildren for generations to come. "What are you thinking about?" William asked, sensing her reflective mood. "About how lucky I am," Rebecca said simply. "About how one choice, one leap of faith gave me everything." William turned her in his arms so they were facing each other. His eyes, still that beautiful green despite the years, looked at her with all the love and devotion he had shown from the very beginning. "I am the lucky one," he said. "You took a chance on me and you made my life complete." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 26 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. The sun was rising over the mountains now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day was beginning, full of promise and possibility, just like all the days before it and all the days yet to come. Rebecca and William Irving, mail-order bride and lonely rancher, had built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were gone. Something that proved that love, real love, could take root anywhere, even in the harsh mountain wilderness. Especially there, perhaps, where only the strong and true could survive. As they stood together in the morning light, surrounded by the evidence of their love in every direction, Rebecca sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For the courage to take a chance. For the man who had caught her. For the life they had built together. For every moment of every day they had been given. "Ready for another day?" William asked, squeezing her hand. "Always," Rebecca replied. "As long as we are together." And hand in hand they stepped out onto the porch to greet the morning, ready to face whatever came next, just as they always had. Together, always together, home,